So chat, one of the things I want to talk about today is a video that dropped today on YouTube that has a lot of people talking. And you have a lot of people from both sides of the argument. Some people are in support of iDubbbz for this. A lot of people are against iDubbbz for this. It's a very mixed bag. And I'm going to share my thoughts with you guys. The one thing I want to say, prefacing this, is like I've made this comment before in my content in the past. I don't mind people who decide to change. Okay, I don't mind people who decide to grow as a person. Maybe they kind of look back on their life and see some of the things they did in the past and they're not too fond of them anymore. You know, as we grow as adults, our views on things change, our mindset on things change, our opinions on things change, etc., etc., etc. So it's not uncommon for a person to feel one way at one point in their life, and as time goes on, they feel a little bit differently, and they kind of look back on their past with a lot of regret, okay? I've actually had this experience myself, which I actually tweeted on Twitter that this was a very fitting time for this video to come out, because a lot of you guys know I'm feeling very differently lately about some of the things I've done in the past, whether it was content I created, whether it was kind of the way I behaved on social media and stuff like that. I have a lot of regrets for the way I behaved. Now, granted, when you look at the kind of content I produce and the kind of people that produce that kind of content, some would say that I was one of the lesser toxic people, but I had my moments. Like, I definitely look back at some of my videos and I'm just like, dude, like, why was I so mad in this video? Like, one that comes to mind, it's kind of funny looking at in hindsight, but when I covered like the Nick Smirk situation with what is his name, A Thoughts, like I was so mad at Nick Merckx, although that's where the infamous burger neck meme came from. I need to get the burger neck meme on the soundboard. That's a missed opportunity. But like, I was so mad in that video, and it's like, why was I so mad? Like, that's insane. And then I've recently talked about how, like, with the Susie Lou thing, I'm still proud of my coverage of the Susie Lou story, but I do think that I took it a little too far. I think that, you know, I put out too many videos and it got a little bit obsessive for sure. And then the biggest thing for me was like social media dog piles, right? Like, I'd go on Twitter, I'd start quote tweeting people and arguing with them and shit like that. And like, it got really toxic. And it was one of those things that, like, I kind of look back at it and I'm like, you know, I'm not too proud of that. I don't necessarily have a problem with talking about internet drama, which is why I still talk about internet drama, right? I think there's a way to do it without being such a hateful piece of shit or a toxic piece of shit or anything like that. And so, like, that's kind of like what I do now. But yeah, I think that, like, you know, people change, and I'm kind of like looking at myself and I'm looking at the way I did things. I'm like, I don't like to do things like that. I don't want to do that anymore. No disrespect to anybody who engages in that kind of, you know, content and stuff like that. If that's the kind of thing you're into, you do you. I know a lot of people like looked at me leaving the commentary community as like a personal attack against them. I maybe didn't make it so clear when I had a previous conversation with Augie about this on my stream. Some of you guys probably saw that in a video. Let me be clear. I am not judging what anybody chooses to do with their content or anything like that, okay? I'm making decisions for myself based on how I feel about myself and some of the ways that I may have engaged in the past. But if you like to do that kind of content, if you like to do that kind of social media engagement and stuff like that, you go right ahead. I'm not judging anyone. I'm not saying anybody's like an evil person or anything like that. I'm just like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do what I want to do because I think it's best for me. That's it. Right? But anyways, back to the iDubbbz video. I think this video kind of landed at like a fitting time. And while I don't agree with everything that iDubbbz says in this video, for the most part, I don't have a problem with people deciding to change in life and become a better person in life and grow as a person, mature as a person, etc. So I wanted to kind of watch this video with you guys. I wanted to give you guys my thoughts as we went along. So without further ado,
play that shit!
Here we go.
For a while, I felt like if I changed my content over time, that people would see that as a reflection of who I am and what I value. But I'm starting to realize...
By the way, Alfred34, thank you so much for the raid. What's good? Haven't seen you in a while. How you doing? Welcome to the stream. I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to the Raiders. Always happy to have new people in the community. If you haven't already, be sure to drop a follow and you can hang out with us. We're talking about the iDubbbz video. I'm kind of giving my thoughts as we go along. So you guys showed up at a good time. We literally just started the video. So here we go.
That is a very weak and passive way to, run my channel and live my life. So I think it's, if I'm going to have the balls to go to Tana's fan meetup and say slurs at her and then make a video about how it's okay to say slurs, I think I should have the balls to make an apology video and take accountability for the mistakes I've made. So that's what this video is. I've realized that I need to...
So essentially, he obviously, if you haven't noticed, like basically, iDubbbz kind of has a change of heart about his past. He has a change of heart about some of the content he's produced, some of the ways he's acted in the past, and all of those things, right? And so he wants to kind of explain where he's coming from. He wants to apologize for some of the things that he now feels weren't appropriate things to engage in, right? And again, like ultimately that's like his prerogative. If he decided, hey, you know what? I'm not too happy with what I've done in the past and I want to do different things now. Hey, that's cool. The one thing I will disagree with him on, and there's a couple things I'll disagree with him on, but we'll address the second one when he gets to it. The one thing I do disagree with iDubbbz on is the way he's kind of like villainized his fans. At the end of the day, your fans are the ones that got you to where you're at today, right? Like I have fans. You guys are the ones who are watching this stream. If you're watching this on YouTube, you guys are the ones who will watch this on YouTube later, right? I appreciate my fans, the people who've supported me, the people who helped me get to where I am today, all right? So I get that like he wants to change, but like the whole like shitting on your fans in the process, not a big fan of that, right? You probably shouldn't do that. Understandably, when you go through these changes, some of your fans aren't going to be a big fan of that change. I'm experiencing that right now. A lot of people aren't too fond of me kind of going through this same similar change in my own life. So like, I get it, right? But don't shit on your fans. All right. Like do whatever you need to do to bring yourself to a happy place in your life. But, don't shit on your fans because ultimately they're responsible for you being where you are today. Anyway, let's continue.
Be crystal clear about what I believe, so there's no room for ambiguity. I am responsible for creating a lot of hurtful and damaging content on this channel. And I've also created a culture of apathy and...
Roar in the chat says, I think there's a way to reflect without blaming externals. Yeah, exactly, right? That's kind of like... Here's the unfortunate thing about my separation from... I wasn't going to mention it, but fuck it, we'll just talk about it. My separation from the commentary community, the sort of commentary sphere of creators that associate like with that community, okay? I did it the wrong way, okay? I didn't do it in a way that was like... It caused a lot of conflict and misunderstandings and stuff like that. I needed to better explain that I wasn't judging what they're doing. If they're happy with what they're doing, they can continue to be happy with what they're doing. It's totally fine, okay? But I needed to make a change in my life for myself, okay? It wasn't about judging anyone. It wasn't about being mad at anyone. It wasn't about saying anyone's, toxic or anything like that. That was a toxic space for me to be in. That is it, okay? Were there things that were said when I was a part of that community that I didn't like or appreciate? Sure. But that's irrelevant to the decision for me leaving. I just needed to get myself out of a toxic space that I no longer wanted to be a part of. And I wanted to do it in a way where I wasn't judging people who continue to operate in that space or burning bridges with those people or something like that. But I got to be honest. I got to take accountability. I didn't address that appropriately. So there's a lot of misunderstandings that happened. There's a lot of, people upset and stuff like that. And I'm sorry, because that was not my intention whatsoever. I did not communicate my points well. So, but, it's just one of those things, it's just one of those things where like I decided to make changes in my life that I wanted to basically make myself a better person in my own view of myself. And it kind of is what it is, but it caused a lot of confusion. And admittedly, I probably didn't communicate that too well.
I don't know, a lot of like cruelty as well. Like, some of the videos I've made have been very... not edgy. I don't think they some of these videos were edgy. I think they were just outright cruel. So I don't want people to, get it confused about, where I stand. I have made some cruel, hurtful content, and I need to acknowledge that, and I'm really sorry that it's taken me this long to acknowledge it. The content I'm talking about specifically.
Ultimately, like, how he feels about his content now is like his own perception of like his content back in the day. You know, I'm someone who was a big fan of iDubbbz. I used to love the content cops and stuff like that. Like, I really enjoyed that content, right? I'll even go as far as to say, you know, as recently as, you know, maybe a few months ago or so, I'd go back and watch some of that content because I think it was really good. I think one of my personal favorites was the content cop on Keemstar. It was a really good content cop. I thought it was like a really, it's probably one of his best ones, right? So like, I enjoyed that content, but I can totally understand why he looks at that old stuff and says, you know what? This isn't reflective of who I am as a person now. This isn't reflective of who I later became in life. And you know what? I'm not happy with that content anymore. I understand there's going to be people who obviously disagree with him. They're like, no, that was like your best era of YouTube, you know, iDubbbz, like that was your best content, and we love that stuff, and we wish the old iDubbbz would come back. But the thing is, the only person who can decide who iDubbbz is today is iDubbbz. The same way the only person who could decide who I am today is me, right? And so there's going to be people who don't like it. There's going to be people who disagree with it. It just kind of is what it is. But ultimately, us as people, we have to decide what's best for us and how we feel about ourselves. And nobody else can, you know, dictate that. They can have criticism of it. They can disagree with it. They can not like it if they're a fan. But at the end of the day, we have to make that decision for ourselves. And this is the decision he's making here.
Our content cop videos and videos where I was just generally criticizing people for very lackluster reasons. And, you know, obviously didn't have any accountability online whatsoever on my end. I was morally grandstanding and acting as if I am any better than any of these people that I was making content cop videos on, and I'm not. I'm a human. I'm a real human who makes mistakes, and, you know, I make a different set of mistakes than the people I was making videos on, but it doesn't matter. I don't think anyone deserves that level of cruelty or hate. It's also indoctrinated a lot.
That's kind of like my thing, right? Because, like, I think one of the biggest criticisms I get right now is like, yo, you're leaving commentary, but you're still making that kind of content. And again, like, you, first of all, you can make that kind of content without associating with the community that also produces that kind of content, number one. But number two, I think the thing that, like, people need to understand is, like, I think that there's a way where you can cover drama and stuff like that without it being so hateful and vitriolic, or presenting it in a way that encourages your audience to go and like attack and harass people on social media, right? I think there's a way to do it where it doesn't have to be that way, right? You can have a laugh at someone's expense because they did something stupid in your content. You can provide like actual real criticism to someone because they made some fucking mistake or something like that. Covering drama in itself is not a bad thing. Where I think it goes too far is when it becomes obsessive. And where I think it goes too far is like when it becomes a dog pile and shit like that. That's where it's like an issue for me, right? So me, I don't necessarily have a problem with covering drama. And I'm still going to cover drama moving forward. I mean, let's be honest. Who doesn't like fucking drama? I think we all do, right? Some people can deny it, but like everybody loves a little bit of drama, right? So tips for covering drama content isn't going away. It's just, it might be a little bit different from the way I've done it in the past, if that makes sense. But yeah, there you go.
Of people into thinking that this is an okay way to behave, and it's not. It's super irresponsible and shitty. I am very insecure about my ability to create interesting content or like entertain. It's gotten better over the years, but it's something that I have struggled with constantly, and it's one of the reasons why I, you know, kept making this hurtful content. You know, I ended up pivoting it into other things because I felt bad about it, like innately. But it's still something that I struggle with, and I don't want you to interpret that as an excuse, but I hope that that is relatable to other creators who maybe struggle with the same thing.
I mean, I kind of like that, right? And like, I think that like when I had my conversation with Augie made a good point that like, you know, most of my content wasn't bad. For the most part, I had a pretty level-headed approach. But there were times when like I would cover certain people and I'd have this like over the top level of anger. Like looking back at some of that content, it's like, why was I so mad? Like, I think I did a lot of good things in my content. One of the things that I'm most proud of in my content in the past is like, you know, basically clearing, what is it, Eugenia Cooney's name. A lot of people were making bullshit claims that she was defending a predator in her community, and I was able to defend her with receipts and prove that that was bullshit, right? And that got a lot of unnecessary heat off of Eugenia Cooney. Granted, unfortunately, Eugenia Cooney has a, you know, an army of obsessed fucking people who want to see her deplatformed so bad, and I feel bad for that poor girl. But you know, I think some of my content has done some good for sure. But there were other times where, like I said, I was just unrealistically or unreasonable. That's the word I'm looking for. Unreasonable levels of angry at the person I was talking about, right? And it just didn't make sense. And then, like I said, it like for some people it got like obsessive. Like, you know, you start digging into like everything they're doing so that you can make more videos out of it, right? And you can just constantly crank out content related to that person. Or like you go on social media and you nitpick everything they do and you start quote tweeting them in a way that sends like your angry audience in their direction and shit like that. And those are the things where I'm like, look, you want to put out a video or a live stream where you're criticizing someone because they did something dumb or they did something stupid, fair enough. But like when it gets to that level, it's just too much. Right? It gets too much at that point. I think there is a way to cover this shit without it having to be so cancer. Right? When I think of creators who have successfully pulled that off, I think of someone like Charlie Moist Critical, right? Moist Critical can criticize someone, but it's not this like hateful, cancerous content, right? You look at somebody like Omni. Omni, somebody who I'm a big fan of. Omni pulls this off successfully, where he's covering, you know, the daily drama and shit like that, but he's not doing it in a way that incites his audience to go and attack people and shit like that, right? There's a way to do it without it having to be so toxic, right? And I think when I first got into commentary, I was really good at having those level-headed approaches. And, you know, throughout the years, like I still had level-headed takes to some things, but like other things, man, I just got way too fucking invested in that shit. And I behaved in a way that was just like, man, I'm not happy about it, right? But anyway.
I'm not confident in my ability to entertain. And I think if I had to rely on my personality...
Crazy Man in the chat says, I hope you get on Charlie's podcast at some point. Charlie doesn't even know who the fuck I am. If you were to ask Charlie, yo, what do you think about Tipster? He'd probably be like, who? Who the fuck is Tipster? I don't know that fucking guy. Jeez.
To entertain people, that I wouldn't have any amount of success. And that is really hard to come to terms with. I was being very bigoted in a lot of my videos, and I justified it because, you know, I didn't think it was too serious. And I thought that people were going to see that I had good intentions, you know, but that's so silly, you know. Casual racism is still racism. Casual bigotry is still bigotry. And, you know, I said a lot of things that I look back at and I cringe now, and I'm like, that is an awful thing to say.
Dude, even as somebody who, like, I enjoyed iDubbbz content back in those days, that's one thing that I would never do. Even in the moments where I was, like, really fucking angry with somebody I was talking about, I never used the slurs. So that's not something I'll ever have to, like, apologize for or whatever. I never use slurs in my content, except for the R word.
Hold on. Retard break. I need a retard break.
I do use that one because I do believe that context matters with that one, okay? Like, I would never, ever, ever insult a disabled person or a mentally impaired person using that word directed at their, you know, ailment or whatever. If I'm using that word, it's because I think someone or something is stupid. So I think the context matters with that one. But yeah, I've never used the N-word in my content. I've never said the F slur in my content or anything like that. But clearly that was something that iDubbbz had no problem doing in his content.
Oh shit! Doesn't matter what my intentions are. Like, if I'm hurting people, I'm hurting people. And, you know, who the fuck knows what my intentions are? Like, sarcasm and, like, jokiness and jokey tone only goes so far, especially over the internet. Even in real life, that's, like, an impossible thing to know with 100% certainty. I've just always had this dumb philosophy that I'm not responsible for, you know, my audience and how they behave beyond what content I put out.
I think that's a mindset that a lot of content creators have, especially in the commentary space, is just like, oh, I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about, and I'm not really responsible for my audience. And to some degree, I agree. I actually don't think, you're entirely responsible for what your audience does. There's definitely cases where, you're just covering a topic and someone in your audience will take it way too fucking far. And I disavow that shit. Okay. Having said that, we do have some level of responsibility with our audience. If we are knowingly doing things that are inciting harassment against someone, we probably should address that in a way that prevents that sort of thing from happening. Whether it's something as simple as like, hey, don't harass this person. I'm just giving my criticism or whatever. Some people will put disclaimers in their videos and shit like that. We do have some level of responsibility, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. I don't think we're entirely responsible for everything everyone does in our audience. I don't think so, right? There's no way you can control everyone in your audience. On my main YouTube channel, I have over 100,000 subscribers. We're currently streaming on Twitch. I have 8,700 followers here. There's no way in hell I can be expected to control the actions of everyone in my audience. So I'm not responsible for everyone in my audience. But if I am engaging in behavior that encourages my audience to do bad things, then to some degree, yeah, that's my responsibility. And that's something that I think more creators need to keep in mind, when they cover certain topics and how they cover them, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's stupid. And it's led to a lot of hate and a lot of bad outcomes. And I just want to make it clear that I am absolutely responsible for my audience. And, I guess if you want to, look out for people who are red flags, it's definitely people who had my mentality that say, I'm not responsible for what my audience does. I know that this apology isn't enough. I've clearly done a lot of damage. These videos have been up for a long time and have accumulated millions of views. I shouldn't be able to just make an apology video and walk away from it. This is something that I should live the rest of my life with, and I expect to. I've profited off of this bigoted content for years, and I've made a successful career out of it, and that's not right. I think that this is only a step in the right direction, and I know that a lot more needs to be done to even approach a life that I would think would be like acceptable. I'll
say one thing. I do think he gets a little overly apologetic for sure, right? Like I can understand, coming out and saying, hey, you know what? This is the kind of stuff I did in the past. I'm not really that guy anymore. My views have changed on things. I feel differently on things, and I no longer agree with that kind of content. I can totally understand that, right? But I do think he's a little overly apologetic for sure. I think maybe the word is, I think he's too hard on himself, right? He was creating this content at a time on the internet where everybody was crazy overly edgy. Everybody said the most off the wall shits. It was the wild west of the internet, and pretty much almost nothing was off limits. Okay. So, obviously that doesn't justify some of the things that happened in those times. Looking back at some of that shit, it's like, goddamn, some people took it way too fucking far. But having said that, like, it was a different time, right? And so that sort of thing that he was doing was the norm. As a matter of fact, like, his content wasn't even the worst of it. So I do think that he's a little bit too hard on himself. I'm 100% in favor of somebody growing and maturing to become what they view of themselves as a better person. I get that. And I can actually relate to that on so many levels. But like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to beat myself up for the rest of my life because I put this content out there. It doesn't have to be that deep. But I do respect him for, hey, you know what? I want to make myself a better person, and I'm going to be a better person. It's really hard to do that sort of thing, especially when everyone around you is shitting on you for doing it. You know what I mean? So I can totally understand that.
I'm running ads on this video, and any revenue generated from this video I'm going to match and donate to an organization that would have been particularly affected by the type of rhetoric that I've been spewing on this channel. And again, this isn't the end of what I'm doing. This is just the start. I don't feel like a lot of this content represents me as a person, at least not anymore. There was a time where it probably perfectly represented me because I was a nasty, apathetic, insecure person. Now that I don't feel like it represents me and I want to distance myself from it and keep it from, indoctrinating more people, I'd like to unlist the videos so that people, can access them still for whatever, purposes they might want to do that for. But it's not being proliferated on the website. I feel...
So, like, this is the other thing. I mentioned there was a second thing that I disagreed with him on, and it was the whole privating of the videos, or he's unlisting them. If you have the original link, you could still access the videos, but they're not searchable on the YouTube index and stuff like that, right? The approach I've kind of decided to take it, like with my content, because again, I do think that there is some content on my channel that I'm not too fond of. The way I've decided to handle it with my content is I'm going to leave that stuff there. Because I want to be able to look back at that content and see, how far I've come. Like maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, I want to be able to see where I was at and where I am now, like how far I've come, right? So my thing is I've chosen to leave my old content public. I mean, granted, there might be some situations where one video or two video here and there, I might decide, yeah, I don't really want that one public anymore, and I might remove those things. But for the most part, I'm just going to leave my content there as it is in this moment, right? I have no intention of like mass privating stuff or anything like that. So I kind of don't think that he should have done that. There's still a lot of people who enjoy that content, that were fans of, him when he created that kind of content and stuff, and people would probably like to be able to access that still. But overall, yeah, that's the one thing I disagree with him on. It's like, I'm all in favor of him bettering himself and stuff like that, but maybe it would have been a better idea to just leave the content publicly. Or publicly available, so you can kind of like see this is where I was then and this is where I am now, if that makes sense.
I feel like that's the best solution, at least for the time being. And for anyone who liked those videos, I want this video to be an example and a lesson for you. You can like content, but you can also think that it's irresponsible and it's hurting other people. So just tap into that part of your brain that's saying like, oh, okay, it's probably not that important that this video stays online, because truthfully, I've seen it, I've experienced the content, but it's done a lot of damage. We can just let it go. I'm sorry to everyone that I made content cop videos on. I still don't like the majority of you, and that's fine, but I can recognize that you did not deserve the hate and harassment that I sent your way. I particularly want to apologize to Tana. Tana, I'm sorry. I should have never made that video. I harassed Tana in person and then harassed her online, and that's deplorable behavior. It's so stupid. I'm also sorry to all the black viewers and minority groups who had to put up with that video and put up with, the phrases. I said either it's all okay or none of it's okay. And that's just so dangerous and stupid. I have made content that I'm proud of over the years. It hasn't been as consistent as maybe I'd like it to have been. But, there is a lot of content that I think had a net positive on the world. And, I'm going to strive to continue on that trend. But again...
Cosmic Bond in the chat says harassed. It was a meet and greet and their interaction lasted like 5 seconds. Yeah, true. But like, if you go back and you look at that clip, I will say this. When Tana kind of explained what happened before he dropped his video, she did kind of over-embellish the situation and make it bigger than it actually was. But having said that, if you go back and you look at that clip, she was clearly very uncomfortable. So like, maybe it's open up to interpretation, but I can see how he could look back at that in hindsight and say, yeah, that was kind of harassing in nature. You're going to her event, you're walking up to her and you're saying something that made her uncomfortable. I can totally 100% understand why he would look at that and be like, yeah, I'm not proud of that. Does that make sense?
I'm absolutely going to continue to make mistakes, but I want the mistakes to be a lot smaller and a lot less serious. I also want to give some clarity to the post-fight speech that I gave. I mean, it wasn't a speech. It was a phrase. I was like,
you know, I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but I really do appreciate the support, and you know, thank you for coming.
that
You know, it's really, I've talked about this in previous coverage and I'll say it again. It's really unfortunate that the Froggy Fresh drama kind of overshadowed the event, Creator Clash 2, because my God, if you did not buy Creator Clash 2, you missed out on an insanely awesome event. An insanely awesome event that, might I add, a lot of the profits went to charity. But yeah, it was a great event. It's really unfortunate that the drama kind of overshadowed the rest of the event, but my God, that was easily the best. How much was that again? Was it like $20 or $10? I don't remember exactly how much I paid for it, but it was money well spent. It was a damn good event.
That was addressing the people over the years that I neglected and I left behind. You know, the people whose feelings I, you know, didn't take into consideration. Those are the people who I was addressing as, I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea. Anyone who thinks that I should be shouting the N-word from the rooftops, I don't want to be your cup of tea. Now I want to talk about events and situations that have...
See, that's the part, like, again, his fans got him where he is. This is one of the things that I disagree with. His fans got him where he is. So, like, the whole, like, subtle jabs at, like, his fans and shit like that, like, I wouldn't do that if I were him. What I would have said if I were making a statement like that, I probably would have said something along the lines of, if you want me to do that stuff in my content again, unfortunately, I'm not doing that anymore. But I appreciate the support that you've given me up to this point. If you're not enjoying what I'm doing moving forward, I understand if you leave, but this is the new me, and it just kind of is what it is. I think that's a more respectable way to address your fans. And yeah, some people probably will still leave. They're like, oh, we're never going to see a content cop again? All right, I'm getting the fuck out of here then. But like, I genuinely don't like the whole, let's take subtle jabs at the fans who got me where I am today. That part I 100% disagree with, but yeah.
have happened over the past 5 years of my life that have led me to the place I'm at now. One year I was at a convention and a bunch of fans were, you know, wanting pictures, and this particular fan came up to me and said, I know you probably don't like transgender people, but can I, you know, get a picture? That smacked me in the face. I was like, oh, holy shit. Why would you think that? But I mean, it was fairly obvious.
Dude, yeah, that would be pretty fucked. I'm not going to lie. Right? Like, I can understand how, like, being someone in that position, like, if you met, like, a transgender fan and they said something like that to you, like, unless you were legitimately transphobic, that would probably be like, what the fuck? Is that who people think I am? Because of the content that I create, they think that I'm that person? Like, holy shit. Like, that would make me feel like shit. Okay, like, I know a lot of other people, like, I've seen some tweets referencing that part of the video, and like, yo, like, this is what changed iDubbbz, and, you know, he's cucking out because of that. I'm gonna be honest with you. If I was ever at a fan meetup and someone came up to me and said some shit like that, I'd be like, is that what I'm putting out there in the world? Is that the message I'm putting out there? That it's making people think that I'm hateful towards these kind of people? What the fuck kind of shit is that? Like, yeah, dude, I could see how that would have been like an eye-opener moment for him. Like, oh, fuck. Like, maybe I need to change the way I do things, you know?
Yes, I was being cruel, hateful, bigoted, and being very uncaring about people's feelings. That is a very...
Crazy Man in the chat says, I don't understand why change equals cuck to some people. I mean, I feel like that mentality is like a terminally online mentality. I know terminally online is a term that gets like overused, but one of the things that's the most frustrating to me on the internet is people are not allowed to change, right? Or like, people don't accept people who change. Whether it's a situation like this where iDubbbz is saying, hey, you know what? This stuff that I used to make, I'm not proud of it anymore. And I don't want to do that shit anymore. Or it's a situation where somebody has legitimately like fucked up in the past, and like, people will never let them forget their fuck up. They're always going to be that person, even though, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, they may be a much better person now, but because they did that one fucked up thing that one time, that will always represent who they are. And I don't like that about the internet. people do grow, people do change, people do mature, people do kind of look into themselves and say, hey, you know, I made some enemies that I shouldn't have made. I burned some bridges I shouldn't have burned. I said some things I shouldn't have said. I did some things I shouldn't have did. And I don't want to be that person anymore. So I want to change and I want to do better, right? People have those moments where they really dig deep into themselves and say, hey, I don't want to be that guy or that girl or whatever anymore. I want to be a better person now. And like on the internet, people just aren't allowed to change. And I see Barnaby says that's society in general to some extent, but it just seems more amplified on the internet. Anytime anybody is going through some process in their life where they're changing, it just draws out like an insane level of like vitriol and like hatred and like frustrations. And like, I don't get it. It's very, ultimately in many cases, it's just somebody living their own life. They're living their own life experience in a way that they feel betters themselves. And the fact that people get so upset about these things, it's silly. I think my good friend, I don't know if he's still in the chat, but my good friend Ruin Leon put it best. It's fucking parasocial that people get so bent out of shape about this shit. You know, just let a motherfucker live their life the way they want to live it. And yes, sometimes when you're changing, you know, it leads to people getting hurt and it leads to misunderstandings and stuff like that. I get that part of it. But ultimately, if somebody wants to make changes in their life that they feel will make them a better person, what is the big fucking deal? I'm not even just speaking from the perspective of somebody who's kind of going through this shit myself right now, but just in general. I've seen this happen so many times. I've even slinged barbs at people who've done the same thing in the past. I was one of the people shitting on someone who was changing, who was making themselves a better person in the past. And I look back at that and I'm like, why did I do that? Why the fuck did I do that? If this person decides that they don't want to be that person anymore, that's their own life experience. Why did I get so mad because of how they chose to live their fucking life? It really doesn't make sense. Anyway.
Fair assessment to make. I was giving this person bad vibes, and I think I've given a lot of people extremely bad vibes. Another event that was very important for me to experience was I went on a boxing podcast. I was basically like trying to walk back my Tana content cop. You know, I was still very like insecure and uncomfortable with the fact that I made that video, and but I was still coping. You'll see me struggle in this clip to, you know, say that it was wrong.
So I just wanted to let you talk on that, right? Because obviously using the N-word is definitely frowned upon by a lot of people, especially by a non-African American. But I was just curious.
That was a very weird video because I wanted to like criticize her for her like sort of flagrant use of it. I've been pretty flagrant about it too, not in the same way. Mm-hmm. I thought there was a message to be shared there, and I don't think it was particularly. It was okay in criticizing her, but I think it like I probably wasn't the person to deliver the message, if that makes sense. There was a message that I was trying to put out there, and like I'm not really the person to put out that message. I don't regret making the video. I think, you know, there's bits and pieces to take from it that I think are valuable, but you know, I probably wouldn't make it these days. I'm very grateful to those guys and how they broached the subject, because you know, it didn't put me on the defensive. It just made me realize, like, I'm stupid, and I really need to, like, acknowledge these things. Like, what am I doing? I'm still trying to make excuses for myself and, like, you know, why I made that video. It's like, it was a dumb idea. I harassed someone. I was saying slurs, and I was trying to justify it all. A very big thing that has sort of altered my view on all of this is just the amount of hate and harassment my wife Anissa has received over the years. She's had to deal with it from the beginning of our relationship, and I have done a horrible job at acknowledging her and her feelings for it. A lot of the time I just thought that was her problem, or that was you know, other people's problem. Like, it's not my problem that you're getting hate and harassment. And it's like, no, it absolutely is. You know, that's the culture that I cultivated, and I, you know, didn't do anything to change that. You know, over the years it's changed a little bit, but you know, I don't think I've still fully acknowledged how responsible I am for the amount of harassment that Anissa has had to deal with. And this year,
I'll tell you one thing, like, I'll tell you like what really changed my mind on a lot of the stuff that like I was doing, right? What really changed my mind is, like, obviously when you're covering drama, when you're a drama YouTuber or a drama creator, like, a lot of people will try to, like, I just want to cover the drama. I don't want to be a part of it. If you cover drama content, it never fails. You're going to find yourself into some drama at some point. And like, there were many times when I found myself in drama, right? So there were these like little like feuds or beefs or whatever the fuck that happened, these little incidents, you know, some of which that are super embarrassing, some of which, you know, like at the time I thought it was cool because I came out on top on those things, you know, whatever the case may be. I found myself in little bits of drama, but there were really like two big incidents in my, I hate to use the term career because this isn't really like a job for me. It's more of a side hustle. But like there were two big incidents in my career. I'll just use that word because I don't know what else to use. Where I kind of, in a major way, was in the crosshairs, right? I got to experience 2 times in a very big way what it's like to be on the receiving end of like the shit that like, you know, maybe sometimes I was doing like with my videos. Again, I don't think all my videos are bad videos, right? Like a lot of the older videos I did, I think they were perfectly fine. But I said like sometimes there were certain topics that I would cover where I'd be like super, super angry or super, super obsessive about the subject matter, engaging in like the social media dog piles and shit like that. And that's the stuff I'm not proud of, right? Just covering drama, perfectly fine. Even having a laugh at drama, perfectly fine. But like when it gets to that degree, that's the part where I'm like, yeah, I don't like that I engaged in that kind of behavior before. But with those 2 times where I was the guy in the crosshairs, it really changes your perspective on what it is that, you know, I as a creator was taking part in. That was the eye-opener for me, like, holy shit, you know? Like, when I have those moments where I get a little too invested in the subject matter, this is the kind of shit that is happening as a result of my coverage of those topics. This is happening to another person that I'm criticizing in my videos. And for me, that was the real eye-opener. When those 2 things happened, that was the real eye-opener for me. Like, fuck, dude. This is what sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I do to people. And I just didn't really want to do that anymore. So like I kind of started this like journey of like, how can I still create the content I like to make while at the same time not doing that, you know? And like I said, not everybody's going to agree with it. Not everybody's going to understand it, and that's fine. But that was kind of like the moment for me where I'm like, okay, like something needs to change because I don't want to do that to people anymore. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's where I'm coming from. Anyway.
Here I decided to speak more candidly and be more open about who I am as a person and to speak on my life a little bit more. And I did that on Anthony Padilla's podcast. These are the people that I'm attracting. These are the people that I'm entertaining. Like, I need to reevaluate things. They are relating and enjoying this content for a reason, and that's not maybe the same reason that I'm trying to make. I had a very Wild West mentality when it came to online behavior. Like, people are going to do what they want to do. People are going to say what they want to say. And I can pretty much do the same because it's the internet. But I think you have to be a lot more responsible. If you guys are at all interested in how I've arrived here, that video gives, you know, a good bit of context and talks about some of my life a little bit. There is a clip from this interview that's been floating around the internet, and it's me calling my fans antisocial and basement dwellers, and I was like, I didn't like, you know, interacting with my fans. I just want to be clear, like, that was my realization. I think a lot of people are like, of course that happened, is because you were creating that culture and you were attracting those people. And it's like, yes, I know. I know now. I didn't know before. It was my realization upon, meeting more and more fans that I was like, oh shit, you guys are struggling. It was easy for me to identify them struggling when they were outside of my body. But the antisocial basement-dwelling incel that was inside here, I couldn't acknowledge that. I couldn't recognize that. So I needed the mirror to be held up to me. In closing, I want to say that I have always thought that I was an empathetic person because I thought, well, I get angry, I get sad, of course I got empathy. Seems easy, right? Empathy? I definitely have that. There were moments where like a dog would die in a film and I'd cry. So it's like, of course I have empathy. But I never did. I think only in these past couple of years have I gained the ability, empathy.
Crazy Man in the chat says, wait, did iDubbbz just call himself an incel? Yeah, I think we did just hear that. It's funny, I didn't bring attention to it, but I kind of heard that too, and I was like, what? But you're the one who brought attention to it, so yeah, I thought that too. It was just kind of like, huh? Okay.
And I'm very ashamed to admit that. It sounds really pathetic to say at the age of 32 I've acquired empathy, but I have, and I've realized it because I just like can't help myself but like feel for other people's pain and suffering now. I'm still not perfect. I think that is my empathy meter's only maybe like a quarter of the way filled up potentially, but it's at least there. And I just want you guys to know that
Cosmic Bond in the chat says, I died when he said gain the ability of empathy 30 years later, bruh. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many people go through their life not really having empathy for anyone, and then just one day it just, boom, it just like hits them. I remember my dad having a similar experience to that. Like my dad, I don't know if he would admit this, but like, he used to be like a very selfish person when I was younger, right? It was all me. Like that was my dad, and like that's all he thought about, right? When it came to like other people's feelings or other people's needs and stuff like that, he didn't really care about that shit. And then sometime around, I want to say it was later than iDubbbz. I want to say for him, it was like maybe mid 40s or 50s, like early 50s. It just hit him. And he became like a very different person, a very compassionate person, somebody who very clearly just connected with the concept of empathy in their life. So I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Some people go through large portions of their life never experiencing the ability to have empathy for someone. And then like later in life, it just kind of hits them. And it's like, holy shit, like I've kind of been an asshole my whole life. And they have that, kind of similar to iDubbbz or myself. They feel the need to change after that. Once they come to that realization and it hits them, they're just like, I need to do things differently now because I don't want to be that guy anymore. You know what I mean? I always thought, aren't people born like that? I'm so wrong. So, I mean, some people are. Some people always have it. And some people don't. Some people acquire it later in life. Some people never acquire it at all. They're just very selfish people that don't give a fuck about anyone but themselves. So it just depends on the person. And it depends on the experience they live in their life. It's just one of those things.
You can unlock ability, empathy.
That's self-reflection and growth. Exactly.
If you experience more life, it might take you getting hurt a little bit, but it's worth it. It is so worth it. So thank you for watching, everyone. I do want to create more regular content, and I don't want to just have the next 5 videos be apologies. So I have uploaded a squirrel video on my second channel. If you want to watch that.
I'll be honest, I never understood the squirrel videos. I maybe watched like 1 or 2 of those squirrels videos when he started doing them, but then he would upload more and more and more of them. And I'm like, I don't get it, dude. Like, it's not for me. That was still at an era where I very much loved like the content cops and like edgy content like that. So he started doing these squirrel videos and I'm like, I don't get it. And even now, I still don't get it with the squirrel content.
I guess as one final thing, I just want to thank everyone who's given me the space and the compassion to grow as a person, because it's taken longer than it probably should have. I appreciate everyone, and I think most importantly, I appreciate my wife, Anissa. She has been insanely compassionate and helpful and patient in allowing me to grow over the years, and has legitimately encouraged me to be a better person, and not a better person in just like the iDubbbz becoming woke kind of way. She was the one.
I still think the term woke is so cringe. I hate that term so much. It's so cringe.
Who said that I should try this boxing thing. I would have never done that on my own because I was insecure and I was pathetic. I did this, and I am so glad I did. It's been amazing. So, Anissa, I love you. You're amazing. Right now you're streaming. But bon voyage. Toodles.
All right, so there's the video, and it's pretty mixed, getting a mixed reception. You can see that like to dislike ratio there. Some people are supportive of him. A lot of people are not. And like, I get it. Whenever somebody makes a change like this, it's always going to be somewhat controversial to some people. I actually did kind of tweet my thoughts on the situation. And admittedly, people are not the biggest fan of my thoughts. And that's fine. Like if people don't agree with my take on this, that's totally fine. I just gave my honest, true opinions and feelings on the matter. And so I wanted to share that with you guys right now. This was my thread of tweets about the situation involving iDubbbz. I said, I saw the iDubbbz video and it couldn't come out at a more fitting time. Obviously, I'm referring to my own, experience with kind of growing and changing and reflecting on myself as a person and stuff like that. So it really was like the perfect time for this video to come out. But I just saw the iDubbbz video and it couldn't come out at a more fitting time. As we grow older, our views change, and with those changes, we seek to grow as people. I know not everyone understands it, but it's just one of those things we all go through at some point in our lives. In short, I respect iDubbbz's choice to better himself, even as someone who once found his older, edgier content to be entertaining. I have a lot of respect for someone who wishes to grow as a person, especially when everyone around you is telling you you're wrong for doing so. It takes guts, man. Best of luck to you, iDubbbz. And so that's kind of the way I feel about it. People change. When you know a person, they're not always going to be that same person that you met 10, 20, 30 years ago. As they change and they grow with time, they're going to feel differently about things. They're going to think differently about things. It's just a part of life. All right. And so we all hit a point where we decide that it might be time to grow up a little bit. It might be time to mature a little more. It might be time to seek out personal growth. All right. And it's one of those things that somebody mentioned. It's a societal thing. I think it's more evident on the internet. People don't like when people change. People fear change. And a lot of times people don't accept that people change. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that a lot of the same people who are criticizing iDubbbz right now for his change, or are criticizing me for my change, or criticizing other people who've made similar changes, I think at some point in their life, they'll hit that roadblock too, where they decide it's time for them to change too. I think a lot of the people who don't understand it, they're just at a level of maturity where they're not quite there yet. But eventually they'll get there and they'll understand. And I think they'll kind of reflect on like these situations where maybe they criticize people who were going through that change in their life. And I think they'll look a little bit differently about it later in life. But who knows? Some people never mature, so maybe not. But I think most people will look back on these times and think a little bit differently about it. But we'll see.